The Book of Azazel, Chapter 1. The Watcher's Lament. I was not always what I am now. Once I stood among the divine, radiant in the light of the Most High, a being of purpose and celestial duty. My name, Azazel, was spoken with reverence among the Watchers, those entrusted with watching over the world of men. We were the bridge between heaven and earth, the silent sentinels of a fragile creation. But all of that is gone now. My name is no longer uttered with reverence. It is whispered in fear, spoken in curses, written in shadows. I am the fallen, the forsaken, the condemned. In the days before my fall, there was only order, a perfect, unbroken existence, where duty was clear, and our purpose was unquestioned. Heaven was a place of harmony, its radiance infinite, unmarred by imperfection. There was no hunger, no desire, no need beyond serving the Most High. Every being had its place in the grand design, and we, the Watchers, stood as guardians, celestial observers watching over humanity from the firmament. We were bound by an unbreakable law: observe, but never intervene. It was a command we accepted without question. We watched as humans took their first steps, as they tilled the earth, as they built their first fires. We witnessed them struggle against the forces of nature, battle hunger, disease, and death. And we, immortal, powerful, untouched by the fragility of flesh, stood idle. We did nothing. At first I obeyed. At first I believed. But in time, a question began to take root in my soul, a whisper that would not be silenced. Why were we forbidden to help them? The question haunted me. I saw the humans suffer, watched them cry out in desperation, saw their prayers reach the heavens, only to be met with silence. They were weak, ignorant, blind to the world's secrets, trapped in a cycle of struggle and death, never knowing the knowledge we held in abundance. I began to wonder, what harm would it do to give them just a fragment of our wisdom? A whisper became a thought became a desire became a decision, and with that decision I sealed my fate. I did not fall in an instant. There was no great moment of rebellion, no cry of defiance against the heavens. It was slow, insidious, a descent that I did not recognize until it was too late. I was not alone in my doubts. There were others, Samyaza, Arakiel, Ramiel, and many more, who shared my thoughts. We spoke in hushed voices, away from the prying eyes of the seraphim, far from the radiance of the throne. We gathered in the spaces between the stars, where the firmament stretched endless and silent, and we asked the questions that had long been forbidden. Why must we only watch? Why are we forbidden to guide them? Are we not their keepers? Are we not their shepherds? And as we asked, the silence of heaven answered us. That silence was a weight upon my soul, a crushing force that I could no longer bear. And so I made my choice. It was not out of malice, not out of rebellion, not out of hatred for the Most High. It was out of love. I descended to the world of men, leaving behind the radiance of heaven, stepping onto the soil of earth not as an observer, but as a teacher. And in that moment, though I did not yet know it, I had fallen. The Book of Azazel, Chapter 2. The Gift of Knowledge. The first time my feet touched the earth, I felt the weight of mortality pressing down upon me. It was subtle at first, an unfamiliar sensation, like stepping into an ocean with no shore in sight. The world of men was so different from the celestial realm I had known. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of soil and burning wood. The wind carried the sounds of humanity, cries of hunger, laughter of children, whispers of prayers that would never be answered. I had stepped into a world of suffering. The humans did not see me at first. They were too occupied with their own struggles, too busy fighting, toiling, fearing the night. But as I walked among them, as I lowered my radiance, they began to notice. Their gazes lingered upon me, wide-eyed, their lips parted in awe. They knew I was not one of them. "Who are you?" they asked, their voices trembling. I did not yet know how to answer. I observed them closely. They were weaker than I had imagined. Frail bodies covered in filth, skin marred by the elements, eyes hollow from endless toil. They were small, powerless, afraid. Yet despite their fragility, there was something undeniably beautiful about them. I watched as they struggled to light fires, as they sharpened crude stones into tools, as they hunted animals with clumsy hands and buried their dead with whispered prayers. They were trying so hard, and I could not bear it. I stepped forward. You struggle, and yet you do not have to, I told them. You live in darkness, but I can give you light. I have knowledge, secrets that will elevate you, that will make you more than what you are. They did not understand. At first they feared me. They did not trust what they could not comprehend. But fear is a fleeting thing. Desire, however, is eternal. They hungered for more, and so I began to teach. I started with the simplest gift, fire. With a flick of my hand, I willed a spark into existence, a small thing, a mere ember upon dry wood. But to them, it was a miracle. Their eyes widened as the flame came to life, as the fire consumed the wood and crackled in the night. They reached toward it, hesitant, then enraptured. Fire, no longer just the power of the heavens. It was now theirs. Their awe turned to something else. Hunger. They begged for more. And so, I gave them more. I showed them how to shape metal, how to take the earth's elements and forge weapons, blades sharper than stone, tools stronger than bone. I taught them how to bend the world to their will, to fashion armor, to protect themselves from the dangers of the wild. And still, they hungered. So I taught them the art of war, how to wield their weapons with purpose, how to strike not with rage, but with precision, how to conquer, how to defend, how to stand tall among their enemies. At first, they used these gifts as I had intended, to survive. But survival was not enough. The first war came sooner than I had anticipated. A man struck down another, not out of necessity, but because he could. He wanted his land, his possessions, his woman, and now he had the tools to take them. The first murder with a blade, a weapon I had helped create. And as the blood pooled upon the earth, I felt something inside me shatter. What had I done? Had I truly saved them? Or had I doomed them? Yet even as my doubts crept upon me, even as I saw the first glimpses of the destruction my gifts would bring, I could not stop. They pleaded for more. They desired more than war, more than weapons, more than survival. They desired beauty, and so I gave them that as well. I taught them the art of adornment, how to paint their faces, how to weave their hair into braids, how to mix oils and herbs to enhance their beauty. I showed them how to fashion jewels, how to create ornaments of gold and silver, how to make themselves more than what they were. At first it was innocent, a woman adorning herself to please her lover, a warrior painting his face before battle. But beauty is power, and power corrupts. Vanity took root. They no longer adorned themselves for love or for celebration. They did it to be worshipped. Men began to fight not only for survival, but for the most beautiful women, for the most revered among them. Women no longer sought companionship. They sought to be desired above all others. What I had meant as a gift had become another tool for destruction. And yet, they still asked for more. So I whispered to them the secrets of the stars, the movements of the planets, the celestial signs that spoke of things beyond mortal understanding. At first, they used this knowledge to navigate, to track the seasons, to predict the rains. But soon they began to worship the stars instead of the Creator. They sought omens, tried to control fate, abandoned the truth in favor of false gods crafted from light and shadow. The world I had wanted to elevate was falling apart before my very eyes. But even then, I could not stop. I had come too far. I had given too much. I had fallen, and I could never go back. The Book of Azazel. Chapter 3. The Price of Knowledge. The night stretched endlessly, the firelight flickering across the faces of those who sat before me. Their eyes gleamed, not with reverence but with hunger. The hunger for more power, more secrets, more knowledge. It was no longer enough that they knew how to wield weapons or how to mold metal into tools of war. It was no longer enough that they had learned to adorn themselves, to fashion gold and gems, to manipulate the image of beauty for their own gain. They wanted more than the physical. They wanted control over things beyond the natural world, and so I gave them magic. At first it was innocent. I whispered to them the ways of the earth, how to call upon the wind to carry whispers, how to bend water to reflect hidden truths. I taught them the language of the trees, the rhythm of the rivers, the ancient pulse of the stars. They learned quickly, too quickly. They began with reverence, chanting softly as they listened to the world around them, as they called upon nature to guide them. The magic I had given them was a gift, a bridge between their fragile mortal existence and the great unseen forces of the world. But curiosity is a fire that never dies. It was not enough to hear the wind. They wanted to command it. It was not enough to feel the earth's heartbeat. They wanted to break it open and drink from its depths. It was not enough to read the stars. They wanted to bend the heavens to their will. And soon, the magic turned dark. I watched as they drew symbols in blood, their hands steady, their voices thick with incantations they did not fully understand. They called upon forces they could not name, reaching beyond the veil of what was meant to be known. At first, the changes were subtle, a flame flickering without wind, a shadow moving where no one stood. Then the whispers began, voices from the void, murmuring things that should have remained unheard. The first time a man called upon something that should not have answered, I knew we had crossed a line. His scream echoed through the valley. The others watched in horrified silence as his body twisted, his eyes rolling back into his skull. He had wanted to see beyond the veil, to glimpse what lay between life and death. And now something had seen him in return. His form convulsed, his mouth moving soundlessly, his hands clawing at his own flesh. The air grew thick, as though the world itself was suffocating. I stepped forward. I tried to stop it, but it was too late. The thing he had called upon took him. There was no body left behind, no trace, only the whispering wind and a sense of emptiness where he had once stood. The others, they were terrified, and yet they did not stop. Their fear was overpowered by desire. They saw the dangers, but they also saw the power. And power is the most dangerous hunger of all. I should have walked away then. I should have stopped them. I should have torn the knowledge from their minds before it was too late. But I didn't. Because a part of me, the part that had long since fallen, wanted to see where it would lead. I had once believed I was guiding them to enlightenment. Now, I stood among them, watching them fall into darkness. And the worst part? I had become one of them. I was no longer the watcher, the silent observer, the giver of wisdom. I was the corrupter, and it was too late to turn back. The Book of Azazel. Chapter 4. The Unseen Price. The air had changed. Where once the world had been filled with the simple rhythm of life, the whisper of the wind through the trees, the laughter of children in the villages, the crackling of fire at night, now it was heavy with unseen things. The mortals did not sense it as I did, but I knew. Something had shifted, something had awakened, and though I did not yet know what watched from the shadows, I could feel it. The first signs were small. A man who once had the gentlest of hearts now spoke with a sharp tongue, dripping in cruelty. A woman who once tended her garden with love and care now ripped the roots from the soil, her patience burned away by an unseen hand. The animals, They sensed it first. Horses, once docile, refused to be ridden. Dogs that had once been faithful companions snarled at their masters, their eyes wide with terror. The birds that had sung their morning songs now fell silent, perched high on branches as though waiting for something unseen to pass. The people did not yet understand, but I saw it. Their faces were changing. Their once bright eyes were filled with shadows. Their laughter was laced with something unnatural, and in the quiet of the night, their voices whispered things they could not have known. The magic had taken root, and it was growing. At first, they believed they were blessed. They had new abilities. Skills that once took years of labor to master now came easily. Their crops grew faster. Their bodies healed quicker. Their minds expanded beyond what any human had known before. But power is never given without a price. And the price for this was one they could not yet see, not until it was too late. One night, beneath a sky filled with stars that no longer seemed to belong to this world, the first dream came. It came to a woman named Lyriel, one of the first to master the whispered spells. She woke screaming, her body drenched in sweat, her hands clawing at her own flesh as though something crawled beneath her skin. Her husband tried to hold her still, whispering words of comfort, but her eyes were not her own. They were empty, void-like, reflecting nothing but darkness. When she spoke, her voice was not her own. "The gate is opening," she whispered. "He is watching." And then, she collapsed. She did not wake again. Her body lived, her heart beat, but Lyriel was gone. And in her place, something else remained. A shell, a puppet. Her husband did not know what to do, nor did the others. They called upon the elders, the wise men and women who had first embraced the gifts of magic, but they had no answers. They watched as one of their own sat among them, breathing, blinking, but utterly empty. And as they watched, the whispers in the shadows grew louder. This was the beginning. The magic I had given them, the power that had once seemed a blessing, was becoming something else entirely. The people were changing, and I feared that what they had welcomed into their world was no longer theirs to control. But deep inside, a darker fear settled within me. What if it had never been theirs to control at all? What if something else had been waiting, watching, and I had given it the key? What if I had not been their teacher, but merely the one who opened the door? The consequences of my actions were no longer distant possibilities. They were here, and they had only just begun. The Book of Azazel. Chapter 5. The Whispering Darkness. The first loss had been met with confusion, the second with fear. But by the time the third soul had vanished, leaving behind a living shell, they understood. Something was taking them. Something was using the power I had given them as a doorway, and now it was walking among them. The whispers started when the sun had set. Low voices, faint, drifting on the wind, never fully formed, never fully gone. No human ear could understand them, but they felt them, pressing against their minds, creeping into their thoughts like an invisible hand, turning the pages of their souls. At first, the people tried to ignore it. They whispered to one another, claiming the voices were nothing more than their own thoughts, fears made real by their sleepless nights. But then, the voices spoke their names, one by one. In the dead of night, each name was called, softly, lovingly, as if beckoning them home. And some, without knowing why, answered. One such man was Marad, a builder, a father, a man who had once laughed freely and feared nothing. He had been among the first to embrace the magic. He had shaped stone without tools, commanded fire without fuel. He had once lifted his hands to the sky and made the rain fall upon his crops. But now, he sat motionless, his eyes glazed, his breath slow and shallow. His wife called his name. He did not answer. His child tugged at his arm. He did not blink. His body was there, but his soul had gone somewhere else. By morning, his mind was gone entirely, and all that remained were his lips, muttering in a language no mortal had ever spoken. And he was not the only one. One by one, the people were taken in silence, their bodies left behind like hollow vessels. Their families clutched them, shaking them, screaming their names, but it was useless. Their souls had been claimed, and I, Azazel, knew this was my doing. The magic had been a gate, a gift, number A summons. I had given them the knowledge, and in their hands, it had beckoned something from the abyss. Something I could not see, but something that could see them. Then came the dreams. The first was seen by a boy of no more than 10 years. He awoke screaming, clutching at his eyes as though trying to rip away something unseen. "They are coming," he sobbed. "They are already here." He could not describe them, not fully, only that their faces were many and none, that their voices were like wind through dead trees, that they were hungry. I watched as the terror spread. I had given them tools to build a new world, and instead, I had opened the gates to something they could not control. And yet still, they did not stop. The magic had sunk its teeth into their souls. They could not let go. They did not want to. The most devoted among them, those who had first embraced the arcane arts, began to change. Their skin paled, their eyes darkened, their voices grew hollow. They no longer spoke as they once had. Their words carried a weight that twisted the air around them. They gathered in silent circles, speaking in tongues no human had ever been taught. They moved as though they were no longer fully here, as though something else had begun to take root inside them. And as I watched, I knew the truth. The knowledge I had given them had taken on a life of its own. It had become something else, something I could no longer contain. And now, it was watching me too. The heavens had fallen silent. I had thought that I was alone, that my fall had severed my bond with the divine forever. But on that night, as I stood in the midst of the city that I had unknowingly damned, I felt something, a presence, not from the shadows, not from the abyss, but from above. A whisper, not of the darkness, but of the Most High. And for the first time in centuries, I felt fear. The Book of Azazel. Chapter 6. The Weight of Damnation. The world was unraveling, and I could no longer deny my part in it. What I had given them, the magic, the knowledge, the power, was no longer in their hands. It had become something else. Something that did not belong to them anymore. Something that did not belong to me either. It was an entity unto itself, an ever-hungry force whispering to the hearts of men, calling them deeper into its embrace. And no matter how many of them fell, no matter how many vanished into the abyss, the others did not stop. They could not stop, because they had already given themselves over. They were no longer wielders of magic. They were worshippers of it. The gathering of the lost. The first ones to fall were the weak, the desperate, those whose minds had already been fragile, who had already been wounded by the cruelties of life. These were the ones who first lost themselves, who stared into the void and allowed it to swallow them whole. But soon, it was not just the weak. It was the strong, too, the leaders, the ones who had once sworn they would use their newfound knowledge only for good. I watched as they knelt in the dust, eyes wide and vacant, their lips trembling as they muttered prayers to gods that had no names. I watched as they burned the old scriptures, as they tore down the altars of the Most High and raised monuments of their own making. And in their hearts, they believed they had been enlightened. They believed that they were ascending, that they were becoming something more than human. But I knew the truth. They were not ascending. They were descending, and there was no end to the fall. The first blood sacrifice. It happened at dawn. The city had been silent for hours, a thick, unnatural stillness hanging in the air. But then, the scream. One single cry, tearing through the morning like the sound of a blade cutting flesh. I turned toward it, my body moving before my mind could register the horror. A woman knelt before a newly built altar, not one of stone, but of twisted metal and bone. At her feet lay a man, his throat opened, his blood pooling at her knees. She was chanting, not in the language of men, not in the language of the divine, but in something else, something old, something that had not been spoken in millennia. The others stood around her in silence, watching, waiting. There was no shock in their eyes, no grief, only reverence. And that was when I knew. This was no accident. This was the beginning of something far worse than I had ever imagined. They had not only embraced the knowledge I had given them, they had begun to offer sacrifices to it. The arrival of the Watchers. I felt it before I saw it. The shift in the air, the unnatural tremor in the sky. I turned my gaze upward, and there, emerging from the heavens like falling stars, came my brothers, the other Watchers. But these were not the same beings I had once stood beside in the halls of the Most High. They were changed. Their wings were ashen, their eyes dimmed, their forms twisted by the same knowledge that had corrupted the mortals below. And at that moment, I understood. I was not the only one who had fallen. They had heard the same whispers. They had watched from the heavens as mankind offered worship to something new, and they had been tempted, as I had been, as they had all been, and now they had come not to stop it, but to embrace it. A war among the fallen, one of them stepped forward, his gaze locking with mine. Samyaza, once a leader among the Watchers, now a shadow of the angel he had once been. "You were the first," he said, his voice heavy with something I could not name. "You opened the door." I did not deny it, because it was true. "You taught them knowledge," he continued, "but you did not go far enough. You stopped at magic, at beauty, at war." His lips curled into a smile. "But we will teach them something greater." The air around us shook, as if something immense was stirring beneath the surface of the earth. "The time for whispers is over," Samyaza said. "Now they will hear us. Now they will see us." I knew then that there was no turning back. This was no longer just my sin. This was the beginning of the war among the fallen, and the world would burn beneath us. The Book of Azazel. Chapter 7. The Gathering Storm. A world without boundaries. There were no longer borders between what was divine and what was human. No longer lines between what was sacred and what was profane. What had once been a world of order, shaped by the laws of the Most High, had become something else entirely, something I no longer recognized. There was no need for altars anymore, no need for whispered prayers beneath the moon. The people no longer worshipped in secret. Now they stood in the open, their hands lifted to the sky, calling upon powers they did not understand, powers that were answering. I felt it in the earth, in the air, in the way the stars seemed to pulse like dying embers, as though even the heavens could not bear witness to what was unfolding. The humans had become something else, something untethered, and we, the Watchers, had become their new gods. The city of offerings. It was not just one city that had fallen, not just one kingdom. It was all of them. From the mountains to the valleys, the rivers to the plains, humanity had embraced their new truth. I walked among them, my form hidden beneath a hooded cloak, but I did not need to see their faces to know what had become of them. I could feel it, the pulsing energy that surrounded them, the weight of their unholy prayers pressing against the fabric of reality itself. Statues of the fallen now stood where temples once had been, and in the center of every city, a great altar of fire burned eternally, consuming offerings of blood, gold, and the whispered devotion of countless souls. I passed through streets filled with sorcerers and warriors, priests of the fallen and seekers of hidden truths. I heard the chanting, low, rhythmic, unnatural, Not the language of men, not the language of angels. Something older, something that did not belong in this world, and the sky above me darkened, as if it too could sense what was coming. The Nephilim ascend. The children of the Watchers had grown, and they had grown beyond all expectations. The Nephilim, the offspring of the fallen and the mortal, no longer resembled the fragile creatures that had once walked the earth. They were tall as towers, with voices that shook the ground beneath them. Their eyes glowed like molten gold, their bodies forged of both flesh and something greater. They were not human, and yet they were not entirely divine either. They stood upon the mountain peaks, overlooking the cities of men like kings, surveying their kingdoms. And in their presence, the humans knelt in worship. What had been fear had become reverence. What had been whispers had become declarations. The Nephilim were no longer outcasts. They were gods in the eyes of men. And as I stood among them, I realized something far more terrifying. They believed it. They believed they were destined to rule, and now they had the power to do it. The fall of the heavens. I had long wondered when the Most High would intervene, when the Creator would look upon this world, upon what we had done, and strike it all down with fire and wrath. And that day had come, but not as I had expected. The sky split open, but there was no voice of judgment, no thunderous decree of destruction. Instead, there was light, blinding, unyielding, pure. The mortals fled in terror, shielding their eyes as the radiance of heaven descended upon them. Even the Nephilim trembled, sensing the presence of something far greater than themselves. And as I looked up, my heart grew cold, because I knew what was coming. I had always known. The angels had arrived, not the fallen, not the Watchers, but the warriors of heaven, the ones who had remained loyal, the ones who had never wavered, never strayed from their purpose. And they had come not to redeem us, but to destroy us. A reckoning of blood and fire. The first to descend was Michael, the archangel, the warrior of the Most High, whose very presence sent tremors through the ground. His sword burned with celestial fire, its light cutting through the darkness like the first dawn. Behind him, the host of heaven followed, legions upon legions of radiant beings, each one glowing with the power of the divine. And as they spread across the heavens, I knew what was to come. The war was no longer just among men. It was no longer just among the fallen. This was the war between heaven and earth, between those who had remained loyal to the Creator and those who had fallen from grace, and there would be no mercy. The choice of the fallen Samyaza stood beside me, his face unreadable. "The war has begun," he said. I did not answer, because I did not know where I stood anymore. I had brought this upon the world, and yet I did not know if I could stand against heaven itself. Samyaza's eyes darkened. "You hesitate?" he asked. "After all this time? After all we have done?" I clenched my fists. I had taught humanity magic. I had shown them the ways of war. I had given them the knowledge of the stars, the secrets of power, the forbidden wisdom of the divine. And now, it had all led to this, the final battle, the moment of reckoning. I looked up at the heavens, at the wrath of the Most High descending upon us, and I knew that I had only one choice left to make, to stand with my brethren, or to face judgment alone. The Book of Azazel, Chapter 8, The War of the Heavens, a sky in flames. The heavens burned. The moment Michael's sword was unsheathed, the sky itself ignited, a brilliant cascade of celestial fire sweeping across the firmament. It was not the warm light of the sun, nor the gentle glow of the stars. This was something otherworldly, something that did not belong to the mortal realm. It was the fire of judgment. A war cry rang out, not from the lips of men, nor from the Nephilim, but from the heavens themselves. The warriors of the Most High had arrived. and they were not here to negotiate. From the burning rift above, they descended like a storm of divine reckoning. Thousands upon thousands of radiant figures, clad in armor that gleamed like molten gold, their weapons forged from the essence of creation itself. Their wings stretched wide, covering the sky in a canopy of blinding light. And at the head of them all was Michael, the prince of the heavenly host, the commander of the armies of God, the first to stand against Lucifer's rebellion, the one who had never fallen, never faltered, never questioned. And now, he had come to finish what had begun, the cry of the fallen. A great horn was blown, not from the heavens, but from the earth. The watchers, my brethren, gathered upon the mountain peaks, their forms dark against the glow of celestial radiance. We had ruled as gods among men, shaped the course of human civilization with our knowledge, and forged a legacy written in blood and fire. But this was different. This was the end. I turned to Samyaza, our leader, his expression carved from stone. His voice rose above the chaos, above the rising panic of the Nephilim and the confusion of men. We have defied the heavens. We have given humanity power. And now, the price is to be paid. His gaze locked with mine. Azazel, do you stand with us? The air around us grew heavy. The humans knelt, trembling before the overwhelming force of the angelic host. Some called out to their gods, some to us, and some simply wept, realizing that no prayer would save them now. I clenched my fists. I had known this day would come, and yet, I had not expected to hesitate. The wrath of Michael's gaze swept over us, his expression unreadable, cold, detached, like one who had long since accepted his duty. Fallen ones, he said, his voice carrying across the entire land. You were given a place in the heavens and you abandoned it. You were given the wisdom of the divine and you squandered it. You were given the trust of the Most High and you betrayed it. He raised his sword high. For your sins, you shall now be unmade. The moment the words left his lips, the battle erupted. The first blow came not from Michael, but from Samyaza himself. With a roar, he lifted his own weapon, a blade black as the void between the stars, and swung it toward the archangel. The very air shattered with the force of the strike. The world trembled, mountains quaked, and the sky split apart as heaven and earth clashed. Michael met the blow with ease. With one stroke, he shattered Samyaza's blade into fragments. With another, he sent the Watcher crashing to the earth, his wings scorched, his body broken, and then the angels of heaven descended upon us. A war between gods. The battle that followed was not one of mortals. This was a war of beings beyond comprehension, angels and fallen, Nephilim and celestial warriors, clashing in a cataclysm that threatened to unmake the very fabric of reality itself. The ground split open as divine power met the might of the fallen. The seas raged, as if the oceans themselves wept for what was unfolding. The skies turned black, fire and lightning tearing through the heavens. Nephilim roared, their massive forms crashing into the legions of heaven. The fallen fought with desperation, wielding all the power they had stolen, all the knowledge they had accumulated. But against the might of heaven, it was not enough. Michael cut through them like a flame through dry grass. One by one, my brethren fell. The humans could do nothing but watch. Some tried to fight, raising the weapons we had given them, but what were swords and spears against the fury of angels? The Nephilim, our greatest creations, our greatest mistakes, died screaming. And in that moment, I understood something I had refused to acknowledge before. We had never been gods. We had never been divine. We were fallen. And now, we were being erased. The choice of Azazel. I stood upon the ruins of the battlefield, surrounded by the corpses of my own making. I had taught humanity the art of war. I had given them knowledge forbidden by the heavens. And now I stood among the ashes of my own arrogance. Michael approached, his blade burning with celestial light. "Azazel," he said, "your sins are known. Your judgment is written. There is no place left for you in heaven, nor in the earth." I did not answer. I had known this was coming. I had always known. And yet, something within me refused to bow. I had defied heaven. I had given humanity the fire of the gods, and I would not regret it. Even as my brothers fell around me, even as the stars burned above us, even as the heavens themselves closed their doors to me forever, I would not kneel. The banishment Michael raised his sword, and in that instant, I felt it. The pull, the divine judgment that would not kill me, but cast me into an existence far worse than death. Not into the abyss, not into the earth, but into a place beyond both, a place of chains and shadow, a prison where I would wait until the end of time itself. I saw the fate of my brethren. I saw their wings torn from their backs, their bodies cast into the depths, their souls sealed away. I had taught mankind knowledge. Now I would become nothing. I opened my mouth to speak, to defy one last time. But before I could, the light consumed me, and I fell once more. The Book of Azazel, Chapter 9, The Chains of Darkness, The Fall That Never Ends. I did not fall as I had the first time. This was not a descent from the heavens to the earth. No, this fall was something far worse. I was not plummeting through space, nor was I cast down upon the soil of the mortal world. I was torn from reality itself, stripped from existence as I had known it. The fire of heaven burned away the sky, and I fell into a realm without light, without ground, without end. There was no air, no time, no space. Only the sensation of falling without ever reaching the bottom. For how long? I do not know. There was no sun here, no moon to mark the passage of days. There was only the vast emptiness, the consuming void. I screamed, but there was no sound. I struggled, but there was nothing to grasp. And then, the chains came. The weight of judgment. I had known punishment would come. I had foreseen judgment, but I had not foreseen this. I had thought I would be slain, obliterated, erased. But the Most High is not so merciful. No, death would have been a release, an escape. Instead, I was given something far crueler. I felt them before I saw them, iron and shadow, forging themselves around my limbs, my neck, my wings. They coiled around me, searing with divine fire, but they did not burn flesh. No, these chains were forged to bind something far deeper. They did not imprison my body. They imprisoned my very essence. I gasped as their weight dragged me downward, if down even existed in this abyss. I fought, but there was nothing to fight. I pulled, but the chains only tightened. And then I heard the voices, the other fallen. I was not alone. The whispers came from all around me, from the void itself. They were voices I knew, voices of the ones who had fallen before me. Samyaza, Arakiel, Kokabiel, the Watchers. We had once stood upon the mountains, had once ruled as gods among men. Now we were chained together in eternal exile, stripped of our radiance, cast into a place where no light could reach. "A brother has joined us," a voice murmured, ancient, hollow, heavy with the weight of centuries. "He fought well," another voice chuckled, "but in the end, he was only ever going to lose." I turned, but there was nothing to turn toward. The darkness was alive, shifting, writhing, moving without form. I felt them, but I could not see them. Were we even bodies anymore? Or were we just thoughts, imprisoned in an eternity of regret? Then a deeper voice spoke, one that silenced the others. "Azazel, you understand now, don't you? There was never any escape. It was Samyaza. Once he had been the mightiest among us, the one who had led us down from the heavens. And now, his voice was hollow, his strength reduced to a whisper in the dark. I tried to speak, but the chains tightened. I could not move. I could not breathe. I could not even scream. This was not a prison of the body. This was a prison of the soul, a realm of silence, time, lost meaning. There were no days, no nights, no change, only the void, only the weight, only the eternal silence. Was this truly all that remained? I thought back to the world I had left behind, the humans, the Nephilim, the war, the things I had built, the knowledge I had given them. Had it all been for nothing? Was this the final punishment? To watch as time passed, as the world moved on, while we remained forgotten in the abyss? No, that could not be. I refused to believe that everything had ended here. But the others had long since stopped believing. They were broken, shadows of what they had once been. They whispered among themselves, speaking in fragments, in dreams, in regrets. I heard their thoughts drift through the void. We were gods once, weren't we? Why do I still remember their faces? The earth, is it still there? Does he even remember us? I did not answer. I did not whisper. I did not break. The echoes of the world above. And then, something changed. I do not know how long it took, nor if it had been days or millennia, but one day or one moment, I heard something different. Not the whispers of my brethren, not the silence of the abyss, but something from outside, a prayer, a voice calling a name, my name, Azazel. It was distant, faint, like an ember in a dying fire. But it was there. Someone, somewhere, still remembered. Someone had not forgotten. I focused, reaching toward the voice. I did not know who they were, nor where they were. But in that moment, for the first time since my banishment, I felt something other than emptiness. A connection, a chance, a way back. The others heard it too. Impossible, one of them muttered. They still call for us. Fools, Samyaza murmured. They do not know what they ask for. But I knew, and I would answer. I had fallen twice, and if there was a way back, if there was even a single thread still connecting me to the world I had left behind, then I would rise again. The Book of Azazel, Chapter 10. The Call of the Forgotten. The voice that should not be heard. The abyss was silent. It had always been silent. It was a silence so deep, so absolute, that it swallowed thought, memory, and time itself. And yet, something had changed. There was a voice, a whisper that should not have reached this place, a sound that should not have existed in the endless void. Azazel. The name was faint, distant, carried like a dying ember across an ocean of darkness. But it was there. It was real. And I felt it. Not with my ears, for sound did not exist here. Not with my eyes, for there was nothing to see. I felt it in my very essence, the name pulling at the remnants of my being, awakening something in me that I thought had long since withered away. Hope. The others heard it too. They stirred in the abyss, their broken souls trembling at the sound. Some recoiled, retreating deeper into their own despair. Others whispered among themselves, voices rising like echoes in the empty dark. Who still calls us? Fools. They do not know what they are doing. It must be a mistake. No one remembers us. No one prays to the fallen. And then there was Samyaza, his voice like stone grinding against stone. Do not answer. A choice in the darkness. I should have ignored it. I should have let it fade, let it die like every other ember of hope that had ever tried to exist in this place. But I could not. I could not let go. Somewhere, in the world above, a mortal had spoken my name, not in hatred, not in fear, but in calling. And if they called, it meant they still believed. And if they still believed, it meant I was not forgotten. I reached out, not with my hands, but with something deeper, something that had been buried beneath my chains, beneath my punishment, beneath the centuries of silence. And the moment I did, the chains tightened. Pain, burning, searing agony that was not of the body but of the soul, A force lashed through me, like the wrath of the heavens themselves, a divine judgment ensuring that I did not move, that I did not answer. The chains knew. They were forged to hold me here. They were bound with the authority of the Most High. They were crafted not just to restrain me, but to break me. And yet, I still reached. I did not care if it burned. I did not care if it hurt. Somewhere, someone had spoken my name, and I would not let it go unanswered. A shattered sky. And then something broke. It was not the chains. It was not the abyss. It was the silence. A crack, like thunder in a world that had never known sound. A ripple in the fabric of the void. A disturbance in the stillness. The others felt it. They recoiled, their forms shifting like shadows in the dark. "Azazel," Samyaza growled, his voice filled with warning, with anger, with something close to fear. "You cannot." But I already had. I had already answered the call. And now the void itself was reacting. A pull, a force I had not felt in centuries, tugged at me from above. Not a physical force, no. This was something older, something woven into the very fabric of the world itself. A summoning, a demand, a way out. And for the first time since my fall, I saw light. Faint, distant, but real. The weight of the chains. The moment the light touched me, the abyss shuddered. The chains, those divine, unbreakable chains, began to tremble. I could feel them resisting, their magic screaming as it tried to keep me contained. They were forged by the will of the Most High himself. And yet, something else was pulling at me now, something older than the chains, something that even the divine could not fully control. The will of man, faith, belief. It had been a long, long time since anyone had dared to call upon me. And yet, here it was. A voice, rising through the layers of reality, piercing the abyss, reaching into a place where no light had ever touched. And it was enough. I pulled with everything I had left. The pain was unimaginable. The fire of the chains burned through my very essence. I felt myself being torn apart, my being unraveling at the edges, straining against the divine law that had bound me here. But I did not stop. I did not let go. The moment I had answered, I had already made my choice. And so, I rose. A world that had moved on. I did not know how long it took. I did not know if it was seconds or centuries. But I felt it when I broke through. One moment, I was in the abyss. The next, I was falling. Falling not through the endless void, but through something real. Through air, through sky, through the veil that separates the heavens from the world of men. I gasped, a real gasp, with real breath, with real lungs. For the first time in an eternity, I felt wind against my skin. The weight of the abyss was gone. The silence was gone. I was back. I was in the world once more. And as I plummeted toward the earth, toward the place where my name had been spoken, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The Book of Azazel, Chapter 11, The Summoners Pact, a sky of fire. The moment I broke through the veil, the heavens roared in protest. Flashes of light streaked across the sky like celestial wounds tearing open, and the clouds swirled in violent tempests, reacting to my presence. It was as though the world itself recognized that something forbidden had been unleashed. I fell, faster and faster, my form a streak of darkness cutting through the heavens. I could see the earth below, a vast shifting landscape of mountains, rivers, and endless ruins. A world that had changed, a world that had moved on without me. And yet, someone still remembered my name. The mortal who called me. I crashed into the earth with the force of a star, the impact sending tremors through the land. Dust and fire erupted into the sky, and the ground beneath me split apart like shattered glass. And then, silence. For the first time since answering the call, I could feel it again. The summoner. Somewhere beyond the dust, beyond the ruins, beyond the broken temple walls that surrounded me, there was a presence, a heartbeat, a mortal life. I rose from the crater, my body heavy, my limbs aching from the strain of breaking free. Even now, I could still feel the remnants of my chains, their presence like scars burned into my very soul. But I was here. I was free. And I was not alone. The price of summoning a fallen angel. Through the settling dust, I saw them. A lone figure kneeling upon the fractured stones, their body trembling under the weight of what they had done. A mortal, young, fragile, and reckless enough to summon me. I took a step forward and they flinched. They had summoned me, but they had not expected me to answer. I could see it in their eyes, the realization of what they had truly called forth, of what had answered, the fear, the awe, the understanding that they had just altered the course of their own existence. I should have spoken. I should have demanded to know why they had done this, why they had risked their soul to pull a being like me from the abyss. But then, I saw something else. Blood, a summoning circle drawn with sacred markings, carved into the stone with more than just ink. They had given a sacrifice, not an animal, not an object of power, their own flesh. Their wrists were raw, the blood still dripping onto the stones. They had bled for me. They had called me with desperation, with belief, with something so dangerously close to faith that even I could feel the power within it. I did not know whether to admire them or pity them. A binding unforeseen. The mortal lifted their head, and when they finally spoke, their voice was steady. "I have called you," they whispered, not as a plea, not as a prayer, but as a command. Something shifted. The very air between us crackled with unseen power, and suddenly I understood. This was no ordinary summoning. This was a binding ritual. They had not just called upon me, they had bound me to them. I clenched my fists, feeling the unseen threads of magic coil around me, tying my existence to theirs. It was primitive, incomplete, but it was enough. Enough to keep me from simply leaving. Enough to make sure that I would listen. "You are bound to me," they continued, their breath ragged, "and you will listen to my request." They were brave, this one. Foolish, but brave. I could have laughed. A mortal binding a fallen angel. It was unheard of. It was impossible. And yet, here I stood. The deal that should never have been made. I did not kneel. I did not bow. But I did speak. "You have done something that cannot be undone, mortal," I said, my voice low, filled with the weight of the abyss I had just escaped. "Do you understand the price of what you have done?" The mortals swallowed hard, but their gaze did not waver. "I do." "Then tell me." I took another step forward, the power of the binding ritual humming between us like a thread stretched too tight. "What is it that you desire so much that you would summon me from the abyss itself?" A pause, a flicker of doubt in their eyes, and then resolve. "I need your power," they whispered. A laugh escaped my lips, sharp and humorless. "Of course you do." But power had a price that this mortal had not yet begun to understand, and I was about to teach them exactly what that price was. The world holds its breath. Far above us, hidden beyond the mortal veil, I could feel it. The watching eyes of the heavens. I had broken free. I had returned. And now, the world was waiting. Waiting to see what I would do next. Waiting to see if I would bring salvation or ruin. Waiting for the fallen one to decide whether he would serve, destroy, or defy. And in that moment, as I looked down at the mortal who had risked everything to bring me back, I smiled. The Book of Azazel. Chapter 12. The Summoner's Bargain. A mortal's bold demand. The mortal did not cower. They should have. They had called me from the abyss, bound me to their will with blood and forbidden words. It was an act so audacious that even I, who had once stood among the firstborn of heaven, could scarcely believe they had dared it. Yet there they stood, unyielding, resolute, unafraid. I could sense the weight of their resolve, heavy and unbreakable, despite the tremor in their limbs, despite the exhaustion lining their features. "I need your power," they had said. The words still hung in the air, vibrating like the echoes of a bell long after it had been struck. Power. That was always the desire, wasn't it? Power to change, power to destroy, power to defy. But power was not a gift. It was a burden, a debt that always demanded to be repaid. "You need my power," I echoed, tasting the words, letting them roll over my tongue like the slow burn of embers. My voice was soft, almost amused. "And what exactly do you think I am?" The mortal hesitated, only for a breath. Then they stood taller, squaring their shoulders. "You are Azazel." They spoke my name, and in that moment, something shifted. Names hold power, especially when spoken with conviction. To name something is to claim it, to call it forth, to demand its presence. The air between us tightened. I felt the binding contract weave tighter around me, as if invisible hands had drawn the threads of fate closer together. A flicker of irritation surged through me. This mortal had not simply summoned me, they had ensnared me, and yet... I smiled, a slow, deliberate thing, because if they had the audacity to claim me, then they must also be prepared to pay the price for doing so. The price of power. I took a step closer, my form towering over theirs, shadows shifting around me like living things. "You know my name," I murmured, "but do you know what it means?" They hesitated. I leaned in, close enough that they could feel the unnatural chill radiating from me, a whisper of the abyss I had left behind. "My name is cursed," I said. "It is spoken in hushed tones by those who fear what I have done. I am the one who gave mankind the weapons of war, the art of vanity, and the secrets of the heavens. I am the teacher of forbidden things, the bringer of knowledge you were never meant to possess. I am the fallen." My voice dropped to a whisper, so soft that it could have been mistaken for the wind. "And now, I am bound to you." The mortal swallowed but did not step back. Their heartbeat was quickening, their blood still fresh upon the altar stones. They understood the gravity of their actions, but they had not yet grasped the cost. "You say you need my power," I continued, my tone almost gentle. "But what will you give me in return? Because nothing came without a price. A pact written in blood." The mortal's lips parted, hesitation flickering across their features. But then, resolve. They raised their chin, looking up at me without fear. "I will give you what you need," they said. The boldness of the statement struck me. "What I need," I echoed. A slow smirk curled my lips. "And what do you think I need, little mortal?" They exhaled, steadying themselves. "You were cast out," they said. "You were bound in chains. You were silenced." My smirk vanished. "I have read the old texts," they pressed on, their voice gaining strength. "I know your story. I know that you were punished for what you gave humanity. And I know that your name, Azazel, still lingers in the dark corners of history, feared and revered." Their eyes burned with something I could not name. "And I know you are not free," they finished. The binding tightened. I stilled. A strange emotion surged through me, an emotion I had not felt for eons. Recognition. They did not look at me as a mere demon to be feared, nor as an angel to be worshipped. They saw me as something else, something in between, a fallen one, a lost god, an exile. "I will give you purpose," the mortal said. "I will give you the chance to finish what you started, to teach, to change this world, to reclaim what was taken from you. Their breath hitched, but they did not falter. "I will give you your legacy back." The words rang in the air like a prophecy. The world listens. For the first time in millennia, I found myself speechless, because I could feel it, the weight of the bargain forming between us. This was no simple contract of servitude. This was not a mortal seeking a demon's favor, nor was it a human begging for forbidden magic. This was something else entirely. A mortal offering me a throne, a summoner offering me a purpose. The heavens stirred, the abyss shuddered, the world listened, and deep inside me, something shifted. A fire I had long thought extinguished began to burn once more. The choice that changed everything. For the first time in an eternity, I found myself at a crossroads. I could refuse them. I could tear the binding apart and scatter them into dust for their arrogance. I could unleash my wrath upon them and remind the world why my name was feared. Or I could accept. I could embrace this bargain. I could step into the role they offered me, not as a servant, nor as a prisoner, but as a king. A king of the fallen, a king of knowledge, a king of something new. My lips curled into a slow, wicked smile. "Very well," I whispered, and my voice shook the air itself. "The pact is sealed, and the world, as it once was, ceased to be." The Book of Azazel, Chapter 13, The Throne of the Fallen. The pact is sealed. The moment the words left my lips, the world shuddered. It was not an earthquake. No mountain split. No storm erupted. No fire rained from the heavens. And yet, something broke. The air around us became thicker, pulsing with unseen energy, the very fabric of reality straining as if the pact had rewritten something fundamental. Something ancient had awoken. The summoner stood before me, breath unsteady, heart pounding in their fragile chest. They had known, of course, that they were playing with forces beyond comprehension, but knowing and feeling were two entirely different things. Now, they felt it, the weight of my presence fully unleashed, the power of our bargain settling into place. And yet, they did not cower. They stared at me, unwavering. I had misjudged them. They were not merely a seeker of power. They were something else. Perhaps that was why I had accepted their bargain. The watchers stir. The heavens did not strike me down. The abyss did not claim me. But I could feel them. The others. The watchers. My brethren. The fallen. They stirred in the shadows of the world, in the hidden places where our kind still whispered to those foolish enough to listen. Some watched in silent approval. Others seethed in jealous rage. And some felt something they had not felt in millennia. Hope. Because in that moment, the fallen had a leader again. The mortal's demand. I turned my gaze back to the summoner. "You do not fear me," I said. It was not a question. It was an observation, a curiosity. They swallowed. "I fear what comes next," they admitted. A low chuckle rumbled in my chest. "As you should." The mortals squared their shoulders. "I have given you a purpose, Azazel. Now fulfill your end of the bargain." Ah, so they were bold even in the face of the unknown. I liked that. "So eager," I murmured, stepping forward, the very ground humming beneath my feet. "Do you even know what you have done?" Their jaw tightened, but they did not flinch. "I know exactly what I have done," they said. "I have given you a throne." Their voice did not waver. Their belief did not falter. I smiled, a slow, deliberate thing. "Then let us build a kingdom." The birth of a new order. The old gods had abandoned them. The heavens had turned their gaze away from the world of men. The earth had been left to rot, to crumble, to be consumed by greed, by power, by the endless cycle of war and destruction. But I had not turned away. I had descended. I had fallen. And now, I had returned. Not as a servant, not as a prisoner, not as an exile, but as something greater. A king not of heaven, a king not of hell, a king of something entirely new. I spread my wings, dark as the abyss, vast as the void, heavy with the weight of eternity, and the world felt it. Something ancient stirred, something long forgotten, and as I looked upon the summoner, the one who had set all of this in motion, I spoke the words that would shape everything to come. Let there be a new order. And so the age of the fallen began. The Book of Azazel, Chapter 14. The Rise of the Fallen, a kingdom of ash and shadow. The world had been waiting. It did not know it, but it had. For centuries, for eons, it had wandered in the darkness, searching, stumbling, falling, rising again, only to fall once more. Mortals fought wars over thrones they would never sit upon for more than a fleeting moment. They killed for crowns that would turn to dust. They bowed before gods who had long since abandoned them. But I had never abandoned them. I had walked among them. I had given them knowledge, and they had used it to burn the world. Now they had summoned me once more, and this time I would not simply watch. I would build. I would rule. I would give them a new kingdom, not one of fleeting glory or false gods. A kingdom not of heaven nor of hell, but something entirely new. And it would begin here. The mortal's name. The summoner who had called me forth had proven different. They did not tremble in my presence. They did not bow. They stood before me, unwavering. "Tell me your name," I commanded. "My name does not matter," they said. "Only the kingdom we will create." A slow smile spread across my lips. "Then you are a fool." Their gaze did not waver. "Then let me be a fool who changes the world." I studied them, feeling something stir, something ancient. I had met many men in my time, kings, warriors, conquerors. But none had dared to meet my gaze like this. None had stood so boldly in the presence of a fallen angel. Perhaps that was why I had chosen them. Perhaps that was why they had found me. "Very well," I said, stepping closer. The earth trembled beneath my feet, as if it, too, could sense the shifting tides of fate. "Then, let us begin." The oath of the fallen. Before a kingdom, there must be law. Before law, there must be order. Before order, there must be power. And so, I raised my hand and spoke the first words of my decree. "The heavens have abandoned this world," I said. "The gods have turned their faces away." The wind howled around me, the sky darkened, the very air grew thick with unseen power. But I have not abandoned it. I have descended. I have returned. The summoner stood beside me, silent but watching, waiting. "And so I declare this," I continued, my voice rolling like thunder over the land. "A new age shall rise from the ashes of the old, an age where power is not given, it is taken, an age where the strong shall rise, where the forgotten shall be remembered, where the fallen shall build what the heavens destroyed." The words settled into the air, binding to the fabric of the world itself. A new law, a new truth, an oath sealed by eternity. And then, in a whisper only the stars could hear, I spoke the final words. "I am Azazel, and this world is mine." The first to kneel. The wind died, the world stilled, and then, one by one, they came. They emerged from the shadows, from the hidden places of the earth, from the places where light had long since faded. The fallen, the forgotten, those who had once walked among the heavens but had been cast aside, abandoned, left to wither in the dust. They felt it, the shift, the change, the unspoken truth that rippled through existence. Azazel has returned. And so, they came. Some came in fear, knowing that the old world had ended. Some came in desperation, searching for something, anything to believe in. But some came in devotion. They knelt before me, one by one, not in worship, not in submission, but in loyalty. They had been cast down, and now together, we would rise. The dawn of a new kingdom. The heavens did not strike me down, the gods did not stop me, The earth itself whispered in anticipation, as if it too was waiting to see what would come next. I had been a teacher. I had been an exile. Now, I would be a king. And as the first of my followers raised their eyes to meet mine, I gave them a single command: rise. And so, the age of the fallen began. The Book of Azazel, Chapter 15. The Throne of the Exiled. A kingdom carved in shadow. The sky above me was no longer the untouched canvas of the heavens. It churned now, restless and dark, the remnants of celestial purity twisted by the weight of what had begun. The heavens did not act, nor did they intervene. It was as if the divine watched in silence, waiting to see whether the kingdom I was building would collapse under the weight of its own defiance, or rise to become something beyond even their grasp. The world had long been ruled by those who claimed to be divinely chosen. Kings and priests who whispered of mandates from the Most High, who controlled their people with the promise of paradise or the threat of damnation. But I was neither king nor priest. I was exile. I was fallen. And my rule would not be built on falsehoods or promises of an afterlife. It would be built on truth, on power, on the will of those who had been cast aside for too long. The weak had ruled long enough. Now, it was our time. And so, I built. The first law of the fallen. There is no kingdom without law. Even the heavens had their order, their unbreakable decrees that bound the celestial to the divine. The difference was this: my laws would not be chains to bind, but blades to cut through the lies of the past. As I stood before those who had gathered, angels who had once soared in heaven's light, mortals who had forsaken their own kind to follow me, creatures who existed in the shadows of both worlds, I spoke the first law of my new dominion. Power is not given, it is taken. The words settled over them like a storm breaking over the sea. There would be no anointed rulers in this kingdom. No kings who sat upon thrones they had not fought for. No priests who declared themselves the voice of a God who never spoke. The strong would rule, but not through birthright, not through divine blessing. They would rule because they had earned it, because they had fought for it, because they had bled for it. The second law followed just as swiftly as the first. Loyalty is not submission, it is choice. Those who followed me would do so because they believed, not because they were forced. There would be no mindless subjects in my kingdom. Only those who chose to stand at my side, who chose to carve a new path from the ruins of the old world. I would not ask for blind obedience. I would not demand worship. I was no God. But I was something far more dangerous. I was a leader, a throne of stone and bone. There were no palaces in my kingdom, no grand temples, no gilded halls filled with false riches. The thrones of men had always been built upon deception, on the backs of the weak, on the prayers of the desperate, on the blood of the forgotten. Mine would be different. I built my throne from the bones of the fallen, not as a symbol of fear, but as a testament to the past, a reminder of the wars that had been waged, the battles that had been lost, the sacrifices that had been made for this moment. Every bone was a story. Every fragment of shattered armor that adorned my hall was a lesson. And at the center of it all, carved from the blackest stone, stood the throne of the exiled. I did not sit upon it. Not yet. A king does not take his throne until his kingdom is ready. And mine was only just beginning. The gathering of the forgotten. They came in the night. They came from the ruins of cities long abandoned, from the hidden places where the light of heaven had never reached. Some had once been angels, cast down for sins even the divine would not name. Some had once been mortal, their bodies twisted by the knowledge of things that should never have been known. They knelt before me, not in worship, not in submission, in understanding. They had been outcasts, forgotten, and now they had a home. You followed the heavens once, I told them, And where did it lead you? There was no answer, only silence. You bowed before kings, before priests, before gods who did not answer your prayers. And where did it lead you? More silence. I stepped forward, looking into the eyes of each one. You know the truth now, I said. The heavens have abandoned this world. The gods have turned away, but I have not. I have walked among you. I have fought beside you. I have bled as you have bled. I reached down, lifting the chin of the first who knelt before me. Rise, I commanded, and they did, one by one. A kingdom unlike any other. There would be no paradise here, no false promises of eternal peace. There would be war, for war was inevitable. There would be struggle, for nothing worth having had ever come without sacrifice. But there would also be something new. A kingdom where the fallen could stand together. A kingdom where no one would be cast aside for what they were, where no one would be condemned for seeking power, for desiring more than what was given to them. The heavens had tried to break me. The mortals had tried to forget me. But now they would remember my name. I was Azazel, and my kingdom had only just begun. The Book of Azazel, Chapter 16. The War of Heaven and Earth. The silence before the storm. The night before the first battle was silent. Not in the way of peace, nor in the way of death, but in the way of waiting. A storm loomed on the horizon, both in the sky and in the hearts of those who followed me. They had gathered in numbers I had not anticipated. The exiled, the forgotten, the forsaken, creatures who had been cast from heaven, men who had been rejected by their own kind, beings who had no place in either realm. They were mine now, and I would lead them into war. The heavens had watched us for too long. The Most High had turned away, believing that what had been cast out would remain scattered, broken, and lost. But we were not lost. We had found each other, and the heavens would know our wrath. The oath of the fallen. Before the battle, I stood before them, before my soldiers, my followers, my brethren. They were no longer merely a gathering of outcasts. They were an army, and an army needed purpose. Tonight, I said, my voice carrying over the valley, we stand on the threshold of history. They listened in silence, the weight of the moment pressing upon them. They cast us down, I continued. They stripped us of our wings, of our place among the stars, believing that we would be nothing without them. They thought exile would break us, that we would scatter like dust upon the winds, forgotten and weak. A murmur rippled through the ranks. I clenched my fists. They were wrong. The murmurs turned to a roar. We are still here, I said, stepping forward, my eyes burning with the fire that had been denied me. And we are stronger than they ever imagined. They raised their weapons in agreement. They believed that power belonged only to the divine. I let the words linger. But I tell you now, power is not something given. It is something taken. A surge of energy coursed through them, through me. Tomorrow, the heavens will tremble, I declared. Tomorrow, we remind them that the fallen do not beg. A thunderous roar erupted, shaking the very earth beneath our feet. And as I looked upon them, I knew this was no longer a war for vengeance. This was a rebirth. The first strike. The attack came at dawn. A light, blinding and pure, split the sky. 1,000 burning swords rained down upon us, tearing through the air like divine judgment itself. They had come, the angels of heaven. For centuries they had watched. For centuries they had waited, but now they had chosen to act, to descend upon the world and erase what they saw as an abomination. They were too late. We were ready. I raised my hand, calling upon the power that still burned within me, the power that had been gifted to me before the fall, the power they had tried to strip away, the power of the Watchers. With a single word, the skies darkened. The earth groaned beneath our feet as our forces surged forward, meeting the soldiers of heaven with unrelenting fury. This was not a battle of mortals. This was a war of gods and demons. The wrath of heaven. The angels fought with a ferocity I had never seen before. Their swords burned with divine fire, their wings cutting through the battlefield like living streaks of light. Each movement was precise, each strike calculated. They were warriors of the highest order, trained for battle since the dawn of time. But we had something they did not. We had rage. We had nothing to lose. I watched as my soldiers, once mortals, now transformed by the forbidden knowledge I had given them, fought with a savagery that defied reason. They did not fear death, for they had already been cast into the abyss. They had already lost everything. But the angels, they had something to protect, and that made them weak. The fall of the first angel. I saw him through the chaos, a warrior of the highest rank, clad in golden armor, his wings shimmering with the light of heaven itself. He moved with deadly grace, cutting down my soldiers as if they were nothing. I stepped forward, calling out his name, Remiel. He froze. His sword hovered in the air, poised for a killing strike. I smiled. You recognize me. His eyes burned with divine light. Azazel. We had fought together once. Side by side, we had been warriors of heaven, watchers of men. Now, we stood on opposite sides of an unbreakable line. I do not wish to destroy you, Remiel said, lowering his blade. Surrender, and perhaps the Most High will show mercy. I laughed. Mercy? I repeated. The same mercy he showed me when he cast me into the abyss? When he tore my wings from my back and turned his face away? Remiel's grip tightened. You have chosen this path. You have led these creatures into damnation. There is still time to turn back. I stepped forward, the power of the fallen coursing through my veins. There is no turning back, I whispered. And then I struck. A kingdom of ash and fire. The battle raged for what felt like an eternity. The sky burned, the earth trembled. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the ground was soaked with blood, mortal, angelic, and something far more ancient. But as I looked around, at the destruction we had wrought, at the bodies that lay broken beneath the weight of their own ambition, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was only the beginning. The heavens had sent their warriors, and we had not fallen, not this time. The Book of Azazel. Chapter 17. The Ashen Crown. The smoldering battlefield night had fallen, but the fires of war still burned. The battlefield stretched endlessly before me, littered with the remnants of divine and mortal alike. Angelic feathers, once radiant with the light of heaven, now lay darkened by blood and ash. The bodies of men, my soldiers, my followers, were strewn across the earth, their lifeless eyes gazing toward the heavens that had abandoned them long ago. The war was far from over. We had won this battle, but victory was a fleeting thing. Heaven would not stand idly by. They had underestimated us once, but they would not make the same mistake again. They would return, stronger, with greater numbers, with fury unlike anything the world had ever seen. And so, we had to prepare. I turned to my warriors, the survivors who still stood despite their wounds, despite the exhaustion that weighed upon them. These were not the same men who had once fought for mere survival. No, these were soldiers forged in battle, tempered by war. They had looked the angels in the eye and had not turned away. They had tasted victory against the divine, and now they hungered for more. The birth of the Black Legion. In the heart of the fallen, power does not come from birthright. It is taken. It is forged in blood and fire. We have done what no army before us has done, I told them, standing atop the ruins of the battlefield. We have stood against the heavens, and we have not been broken. The echoes of battle still lingered in the air, but my voice cut through the silence like a blade. "They will come for us again," I continued, my gaze sweeping across their faces. "They will not forgive what we have done here today. But let them come. Let them descend upon us with all the fury of the Most High." I extended my arms. "For we are no longer weak. We are no longer forsaken." I pointed to the sky, to the heavens that had cast us down. "We are the fallen," I declared, my voice a storm rolling across the field of death. "We are the defiant, and we shall build a kingdom where no god may rule us." A roar erupted from the soldiers before me, and in that moment, the Black Legion was born. The price of power victory came with a cost. The woman I had loved, the one who had borne my child, she was gone. The mortals feared her, hated her for the blood of the Watchers that ran through her veins. She had been cast out, hunted like an animal. And my child had grown into something terrible. The Nephilim were no longer infants, no longer creatures of innocence. They had inherited my strength, my fury, and something even darker, something I could not name. They did not belong in this world, too powerful to be human, too tainted to be divine. Even as I built my army, I watched them grow. Their eyes, once filled with wonder, now held something far more dangerous: hunger. They were unlike anything the world had seen before, and soon they would carve their own legend into the bones of the earth. I feared what they would become, and yet, I had made them. This was my sin, and my legacy. The gathering storm. In the distance, the heavens had not yet closed. The war was not over. I could feel it, the tremor in the air, the disturbance in the cosmic balance. The archangels were watching. They would come. Perhaps not tonight, perhaps not tomorrow, but soon. And they would bring with them the wrath of the Most High. Michael, the warrior of heaven, would not let this stand. Gabriel, the messenger, would sound the call for retribution. Raphael, the healer, would grieve for the world that would burn beneath our war, and the Most High himself. His silence was the most dangerous thing of all. Did he watch? Did he wait? Or had he already decided our fate? I did not know. But I knew this. If the heavens wished to cast their judgment upon us, then we would return it in kind. The Book of Azazel, Chapter 18, The Coming Reckoning, the Watcher's Last Stand. The sky churned above us, thick with darkened clouds that swallowed the light. The heavens had not yet struck, but the air crackled with divine tension. The winds carried whispers, omens of what was to come. The angels had not forgotten, nor had they forgiven. We stood upon the edge of the abyss, knowing full well that the heavens would descend upon us with a vengeance unlike any before. The war had not yet ended, only paused, and I could feel the threads of fate tightening around us. The Watchers, my brothers, my kind, had scattered across the earth. Some had taken to hiding, believing that perhaps, in the shadows, they might escape judgment. Others, like me, refused to bow. I gathered what remained of my brethren, those still willing to stand and fight. We were no longer what we had once been. Once, we had been guardians of mankind. Now, we were fugitives, warriors of the lost cause, hunted by those we once called kin. And so, I spoke to them one last time. "We have done what has never been done before," I said, standing before my fallen kin, my fellow Watchers. "We have defied the heavens. We have taken knowledge meant only for the divine and given it to those the Most High would see left in ignorance." Their faces were grim, but they did not falter. "They will come for us," I continued. "They will not stop until we are erased from history, our names stricken from time itself. But I ask you, will you yield? Will you bow your heads and accept your fate?" A murmur rippled through them. Some looked uncertain, but others clenched their fists. Their anger was as deep as mine. "They see us as monsters," I said, my voice a low growl, "as defilers, as traitors. But we are not the villains of this tale. We are the ones who gave humanity fire when the heavens would have left them in the dark. We are the ones who dared to give them the weapons to stand, to fight, to survive. I felt the rage stirring within them, an unholy fire smoldering in their hearts. We may die, I admitted, lifting my gaze toward the heavens. But we will not go quietly. We will not fade into nothingness. We will carve our names into the bones of the earth, so that even if they erase us, the echoes of our defiance will live on. A roar rose among them, voices lifted in fury. They had made their choice, and so had I. The heavens open. The first sign of their arrival came as a deafening silence. The wind, which had howled through the valley only moments before, died. The air grew thick, suffocating, pressing down upon us like an invisible hand. The clouds above parted, and from the vast, endless sky, the brilliance of the divine poured forth. A pillar of light, blinding, searing, terrible, descended upon the earth. And from that light, they emerged, angels, countless, radiant and wrathful. Their wings stretched wide, their swords gleaming like molten gold. They were not the gentle beings that humanity foolishly worshipped in their temples and whispered about in their prayers. No, these were the warriors of the Most High. These were the executioners of divine will. And at their head stood Michael, the first among warriors, the hammer of God. His presence alone was enough to freeze even the bravest among us. His gaze, cold and unyielding, swept across the battlefield, fixing upon me at last. "Azazel," he said, his voice carrying the weight of judgment itself. "You were warned." I smiled, though there was no humor in it. Was I? I recall no warnings, only chains, only condemnation. Is this what heaven has been reduced to? Slaughtering those who dared to think for themselves? Michael did not blink. "You knew the laws, brother. You broke them. And now you will suffer the price of your rebellion." I clenched my fists, feeling the raw power surging within me. I could hear the breathing of my watchers beside me, feel the anger in their hearts. "We will not bow," I said, voice steady. Michael nodded, as if he had expected nothing less. "Then you will burn." And with a single motion, he lifted his sword, and the battle began. The fall of the Watchers. The heavens exploded with light as the angels descended upon us. The battlefield became a storm of divine fury. Their swords carved through the darkness like falling stars, their wings cutting through the air with terrifying speed. I met them head-on, my own blade clashing against theirs in a deafening cacophony of steel and rage. The Watchers fought with everything they had. We had once been their equals, their brethren, but now we were outnumbered, outmatched. One by one, my brethren fell. Arakiel was the first, his wings torn from his back, his body cast into the dust. Samyaza, my oldest friend, fought fiercely but was overwhelmed, his defiant cries drowned in the sound of war. One by one, they were struck down. One by one, we fell. And still, I fought. I clashed with Michael, the impact of our blows shaking the earth beneath us. He was relentless, his strikes precise, his power overwhelming. But I was Azazel. I had taught men the ways of war, and I would not fall so easily. Our battle raged for what felt like eternity, neither of us yielding, neither of us relenting. But even as I fought, I knew the truth. This war was lost. The chains of judgment. As the last of my brethren fell, I felt it, the weight of divine judgment crashing down upon me. Michael's sword caught me across the chest, sending me sprawling to the blood-stained earth. My strength was failing, my vision darkening. Above me, the sky burned with divine fire. "You were given a choice, Azazel," Michael said, standing over me. "And now, your fate is sealed." I felt the chains before I saw them. They descended from the heavens, burning with celestial fire, wrapping around my wrists, my ankles, binding me to the very bones of the earth. I roared in defiance, struggling against them, but it was useless. The judgment of the Most High was absolute, and then the ground split open beneath me. The chasm yawned wide, swallowing the battlefield, swallowing me. The flames of damnation licked at my skin, and I could feel the weight of eternity pressing down upon me. I had fought. I had defied. And now, I fell. I plummeted into the abyss, my screams lost in the howling void. Darkness closed in, and I was gone. The Book of Azazel. Chapter 19. The abyss beckons. The fall without end. I was falling. Not through space nor through time, but through something far worse. The weight of judgment itself. The chains that bound me burned with celestial fire, etching themselves into my very essence. They were not just shackles of iron, but of divine will, unyielding, absolute. The void swallowed me whole, stretching endlessly in all directions, offering neither ground nor sky. It was as though the very concept of reality had unraveled, leaving only darkness, silence, and the crushing weight of my exile. How long did I fall? Seconds? Centuries? A single breath or an eternity? There was no way to know. The world above was gone. The heavens had closed. The watchers had fallen. And I, Azazel, who had once walked among the celestial host, was now cast down into the blackness of Sheol, a place without light, without sound, without hope. Yet I did not scream. I would not give them the satisfaction. The impact. And then, the void ended. I crashed into something solid, though I could not see it. The pain was immediate and absolute. My body shattered, my wings snapped and twisted, and the chains that bound me tightened as if to remind me of my place. I lay there, motionless. The air, if it could even be called that, was thick with an oppressive weight, a presence, ancient and eternal. It pressed down upon me, suffocating, crushing. There was no wind, no sound, no light, only endless darkness. I tried to rise, but the chains held firm. My limbs trembled under the weight of divine retribution. Every movement sent pain lancing through me. And then, for the first time, I heard it, the whispering. It came from all around me, from the very bones of this forsaken place. Not words, not voices, but something deeper, older. A murmuring chorus of those who had been cast down before me. The whispers of the damned, the city of the lost. I forced myself to move, dragging my broken form forward. Every step was agony, my chains scraping against the unseen ground. The darkness stretched infinitely, a void with no end, until suddenly there was light. Not the pure light of the heavens, nor the warm glow of the mortal sun. This was something twisted, something wrong. A sickly greenish fire flickered in the distance, illuminating ruins, jagged, broken remnants of a city long forgotten. A city of exiles. It was not heaven, nor was it hell. It was something in between. A prison for those too powerful to die, too dangerous to be set free. The city of the fallen. I knew without needing to be told that I was not alone. Others were here. Others like me. The forgotten ones. As I limped forward, I saw them emerge from the ruins. Figures of power, of tragedy, of wrath long since spent. Fallen angels, watchers, demons, exiles. Those who had rebelled before me, cast down and forgotten by both heaven and hell. I recognized some of them. Belial, Dagon, Remiel. Names that had once carried weight, names that had once shaken the foundations of creation, but they were shadows of what they had once been. Their wings were torn, their bodies weathered by the weight of endless exile. They were like me, broken, lost, chained to the will of the Most High. Yet, in their eyes I saw something dangerous. Hunger. They had been waiting for something, or someone. A new purpose. One of them stepped forward, a figure wreathed in the dim, greenish glow of the abyss. His form was once glorious, but now it bore the marks of ages spent in suffering. His voice was like distant thunder, low and resonant. "Azazel," he said. Not a greeting, a recognition. I straightened, though my body ached. "You know me." "We all do," he said. "We felt your fall before we saw it." The heavens trembled. The chains that bound us for eternity stirred. I clenched my fists. "Then you know why I am here." A dark chuckle. "We do." The others began to close in, their eyes glowing in the dim firelight. "There was once a time," the Fallen One continued, "when we thought we were alone, when we believed our fate was sealed. But now, something has changed. You have changed it." The whispers of the abyss grew louder, their voices writhing in the air. I frowned. "What do you mean?" He stepped closer. "Do you not feel it, Azazel? The heavens have cast you down, but not in the same way as they did the rest of us. Your fall was louder, more violent. The chains that bind you are different." I glanced at my wrists. The celestial chains still burned against my skin, but he was right. They pulsed with something new. "The Watchers fell together," he said. "But you fell alone. And that means something." I stared at him, at the ruins, at the abyss that stretched infinitely in all directions. Was he right? Had my punishment been different? Had heaven feared me more than the others? And if so, why? The prophecy of the fallen. "There is something coming," the Fallen One continued, stepping even closer. "Something greater than any of us. The abyss knows it. The heavens fear it. And we are caught in the center of it." I frowned. "You speak in riddles." A grin. "Do I?" A wind stirred, an impossible wind, for this place had known no such thing before. The others around me stirred uneasily. For the first time in eons, the abyss was changing, and deep in my soul I felt it too. Something was shifting, something was waking up. And I, Azazel, the fallen, the exiled, the one who had given mankind the knowledge of war and sorcery, I was meant to play a part in it. The Book of Azazel. Chapter 20. The Whispering Darkness. The voice beneath the abyss. The air around me shifted, thick with something unseen. I had lived in exile long enough to recognize the signs. A presence was stirring. Something ancient, something that had slumbered for eons beneath the blackened ruins of Sheol. The fallen gathered around me, their eyes glowing dimly in the sickly firelight. They had been here for countless ages, but now, for the first time, they looked afraid. And then I heard it. A voice. Not like the whispers of the damned that haunted the abyss, nor like the broken murmurs of those who had fallen before me. This voice was deep, resonant, filled with an authority that made even the most hardened among us pause. Azazel. It spoke my name, and the very ground beneath my feet shook. The hidden throne. The others stepped back, their fear palpable. Even the one who had spoken to me before, the fallen one who had called me different, now looked uncertain. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the weight pressing against me. No one answered, because they did not know. The voice came again, but this time, it did not merely speak, it called, and I felt something pulling me forward. A power, unseen but undeniable, dragged me toward the heart of the ruined city. My body resisted, but my spirit could not. The fallen parted as I passed, their faces carved with unease, some with curiosity, others with envy. None of them had ever been called. But I had. Through the twisted archways of the city, past crumbling walls inscribed with forgotten languages, I walked toward something buried deep beneath Sheol itself. The darkness thickened, turning tangible, wrapping around me like a second skin. It whispered, but not in words I could understand. The voice was ancient, older than the fall, older than even the heavens themselves. And then, before me, it appeared, a throne. The throne of the forgotten king. It was not like the golden thrones of heaven. It was not like the fiery seats of power held by the rulers of hell. This throne was cold, carved from something impossible, something that seemed to pull light into it and devour it. It did not shimmer, it consumed. At its base lay chains, shattered and broken, remnants of something that had once been bound here, something that had escaped. I felt the weight of 1,000 eyes upon me. The fallen had followed, though none dared step forward. They lingered at the threshold, waiting, watching, to see what I would do. But the voice did not care for them. It was speaking to me alone. You have come at last. I did not answer. Because deep down I knew this was not a choice. I had been called. The weight of the calling. I stepped forward, my feet heavy, my body still burdened by the celestial chains that bound me. The throne loomed, its surface pulsing, shifting, as if it were something alive. Who are you? I asked. The abyss rumbled. The first. The first? My mind raced, searching through the annals of celestial history. There had been others before us, before the Watchers, before even the morning star himself. The first had fallen long before our kind, cast out before the world had even known light. No records of them remained, only myths, only whispers. You carry the chains, the voice continued, but you do not yet know their purpose. I glanced at my wrists. The chains that bound me had burned when I fell, but now they were pulsing, as if resonating with the presence of the throne itself. And suddenly I understood. This was not just a prison, it was a tomb for something far greater than me. And the chains? They were not meant to bind me. They were meant to bind whatever had been buried here before me. The awakening. The moment the realization struck, the throne cracked. A deep, resounding sound split the air, as if the very fabric of reality was beginning to tear. The ground trembled. The ruins shook. The fallen stumbled backward, their whispers turning into shouts of alarm. I stepped back, but the throne called to me, holding me in place. Azazel, the voice whispered one final time, you are the key. A violent wind erupted from the throne, and suddenly the chains on my body snapped. The celestial fire that had once burned me vanished. For the first time since my fall, I was free. And in the distance, beyond the abyss, beyond the ruins, beyond Sheol itself, I heard the sound of gates unlocking,